Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Wired's live living room sessions, a special edition. My name is Jenn Ward Clarke of the Caribbean Permaculture Research Institute, and I hope that you've been keeping up with us over the last several months, from April to July, while Walker's Institute for Regenerative Research, Education and Design and CPRI partner to bring you live living room sessions twice weekly. During our over 25 episodes, we engaged local and international experts to share their insights and expertise on the topics of climate change, building biodiversity, renewable energy, and regenerative agriculture. Today's special edition is the third of a special set of live sessions which we will be hosting to mark special event days and days of recognition, which will align with our core focus areas and organizational values. Over the past two special editions, Wired's Keisha Farnham and I celebrated World Youth Skills Day with agriculturalists Christina Pooler and Shaquille Watkins, and World Tourism Day with A. Christopher Lee of PCSR Consulting, Inc. If you haven't already, I encourage you to watch any of our over 25 episodes, and which are all available on Wired's YouTube channel at any time. Today, we are joined by Carla Daniel of Barbados Sea Turtle Project, in recognition of World Animal Day, which was actually yesterday. We are hosting this session a day late because during the day yesterday, Wired and CPRI teamed up to offer a PermaBlitz event at Ocean Acres Animal Sanctuary, a dog and cat center in St. John in Barbados, where volunteers participated in composting education and built a composting system, including planting over 20 trees to beautify, provide shade, and provide ongoing regenerative support to the sanctuary. Thanks to the Cable and Wireless Foundation, FLOW, for powering that event yesterday. The mission of World Animal Day is to raise the status of animals to improve welfare standards around the globe. World Animal Day unites the animal welfare movement, mobilizing it into a global force to make the world a better place for animals through increased awareness and education. We can create a world where animals are always recognized as beings deserving of our respect and our protection. Carla Daniel is deeply passionate about species conservation in the Caribbean. Starting in 2006, Carla has dedicated her time and efforts to the conservation of the endangered Hawkbill sea turtle through her work with the Barbados Sea Turtle Project, where she's currently the field director. Between beach patrols and turtle monitoring, Carla found the time to pursue a graduate degree, completing a degree in biology at the University of West Indies. Carla believes that education, awareness, and empowerment is the key to conservation, and she has hosted a number of educational programs, including a local television series, excuse me, and delivering a public presentations island-wide. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Carla to our session. Carla.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you with us for World Animal Day.
Thank you so much for having me and for thinking about turtles.
Absolutely. So before we get started with any of our set questions, we would love to hear a little bit about you yourself, about your why. Why did you choose turtles? Why is it important to you and part of your passion?
Oh, that's a bit of a difficult question. I wouldn't necessarily say that turtle. Well, I chose turtle. When I was an undergrad at the University of the West Indies in second year, remember it pretty distinctly, there was a notice on the notice board asking for volunteers to work with sea turtle conservation. Now, I'd always been interested in animals and in plants and in general wildlife. And because we're a small island, we don't have a huge amount of biodiversity. And turtles seemed really interesting at the time. I'd not had a lot of interaction with them, so I signed up to volunteer. Little did I know at the time that that was essentially a trap. So I started 1 year. Well, the first year I applied, they were actually full. So I didn't get onto the program that year, but they said if you were interested next year, no problem, you can join us then. So I joined them the following year, which I guess was 2006. And yeah, I've been working with the project ever since then. Now, what I will say about sea turtles in particular is that their plight is one that is dear to my heart. So it is not necessarily that the animals are amazing, and while they are amazing, there are a lot of amazing animals through all types of habitats, terrestrial, birds, etc. Lots and lots of amazing animals. But sea turtles are a species that have a very, very hard time. So they are a species that have a wide range of threats through every stage of their life cycle. And some of those threats are so severe that without human intervention, they simply would not survive them. So because of that, because of the need, I guess you could say, I'm more drawn to them because they need a helping hand. It's also pretty interesting, I've been doing this for about 15 years now, and I've never had 2 days that were exactly alike. Every single day is something different. There's something new to learn. And through working with sea turtles, I've also encountered lots of other animals, birds, and other things that have kind of
Yeah.
contributed to create a bit of an interesting big picture, so to speak. But it, my why really is because turtles need the help. Quite frankly, I'm here because they need the help and I'm willing to offer it.
That's excellent, and I'm sure that they appreciate it.
I don't
um,
know.
so I'd love to hear a little bit more about the Sea Turtle Project itself. I wonder if you, as our first question, if you can give us a bit of the history of the project and its successes thus far.
Okay, so the Barbados Sea Turtle Project is a project of the University of the West Indies, and it is based in the Department of Biological and Chemical Sciences. The project would have started in the late 80s, and it was started by our current director, that is Professor Julia Horrocks. So she would have initially, while doing her postdoctoral degree, started receiving calls and hearing about issues with sea turtle hatchlings and with turtles. Now, this would have been in the late 80s, and at that time, it was still legal in Barbados to harvest turtles. It was legal for fishermen to take them and for people to consume turtle meat. So back then, hearing issues about turtles, there were not nearly as many nesting as we have now. But she felt call, along with a number of other individuals, they got together and they felt the call to attempt to do something and to attempt to, I guess you could say, start to make a difference in protecting the species. One of the first things that they did was to develop I actually have it here, the Sea Turtle Recovery Action Plan for Barbados. And this was done early 90s and 1992. So this entire document basically speaks to where turtles nest on islands, what the primary threats are, and what the strides are that are necessary to go towards mitigating those problems. Now, this document was produced in coordination with the wider Caribbean Sea Turtle Network. So Barbados is one of a whole group of projects throughout Central America, South America, and the Caribbean island chain that are linked together in their goal to conserve their individual nesting populations, as well as our really shared populations of sea turtles. So after 1992, we created the STRAP, the Sea Turtle Action Recovery Plan, and Recovery Action Plan, sorry. And after that, she started implementing that plan. So one of the first things that was done was to lobby for an end to sea turtle harvest in Barbados. Fortunately, by that time, the current generation was not as interested in consuming turtles. Sea turtle meat was not a primary source of protein for the Barbadian population. So ending its consumption was, I would say, it wasn't simple, but it was a relatively easy thing to do. So once that legislation was passed and it is now illegal in Barbados to consume or to have in your possession, there is an up to $50,000 fine or 2 years in prison. It is also illegal to disturb sea turtle nests, etc., etc. So we really made the legislative strides that were needed at that time in order to protect our turtles. So we have gone from a situation where turtles were viewed primarily as food, even if people thought they were cute and they looked nice, they still were viewed as food, to fast forward about 2 decades, or well, more than 2 decades, or almost 3 decades now. And it's a situation where turtles are valued for much more than their meat. They're valued as an important, I guess you could say, feature of our ecosystem. They play an important role in the health of our environment, as well as things like tourism. They are valuable tourism attraction. I hate to say it, but they are a crucial part of our of why tourists come to Barbados, and they do help to bring in a lot of foreign exchange, which facilitates the running of our economy, allows us to import food and all of those things as well. So turtles as a whole, I would say the people's concepts and perceptions of sea turtles has evolved over time with the passing of the legislation. And I think people understand now that they are valuable for more than food. And, there's not really a problem. While I would say maybe there are a couple persons who still take turtles, and there are a couple minor issues with turtle takes. On average, the average Barbadian views sea turtles, I would say, as something miraculous. The number of people who will gather around when there are turtles that have come up on the beach to lay, or the number of hands who will jump to the rescue every time we have baby turtles that are disoriented by lights or in need of help, is truly phenomenal. When you think that we've gone from a situation where around 1992 we had an average 50 nesting turtles on the island of Barbados, and now we have quite a few hundred nesting every year. It's not overwhelming numbers, but we have really made great strides, and that is something to be proud of.
That's very great. I think you should be very proud of yourselves as well. It's incredible to hear the amount of work that has been done, and I was not aware that there was so few nesting turtles back in the day. I don't remember a time, obviously, when sea turtles were harvested. I would have been too young when the legislation was passed. So to me, turtle conservation has always been the thing to do. They were always viewed to myself and I would imagine my peers as a thing of beauty and an attraction, as opposed to good for food. And I believe that would be the way that a lot of our viewers are looking at them today. So to a certain extent, we're preaching to the choir when we're talking about turtle education and turtle awareness. So with that in mind, what are some of the ways, for our second question, that we can deepen our knowledge and take turtle conservation actions just a step further than simply turning off the lights and calling a hotline? What are some of the things that the general public could do or needs to know in order to carry this forward?
Okay, so that's a good question. What I will say is that for persons who have coastal property or who work or live or just frequent the coastline, one of the biggest calls to action is to be vigilant. So people talk about turning off lights. Why? If you're on the coastline, really, you should have sea turtle friendly lighting. So it shouldn't be a case where you have horrible lights and, oh my gosh, there's a turtle, let me go and flip off the switches and turn off my 300-watt light that shines straight out to sea. It should be a case where you recognize that you are sharing this space with an animal that needs it. And this is a critical need. This is not a choice. Turtles do not have the option, oh, let me just lay my eggs in the water today onto the beach because it's not hospitable. Those lights are too bright, they're hurting my eyes. I feel as though I'm visible to predators. They simply do not have a choice. It's a biological imperative. So they need the beach in order to continue their life cycle. We are sharing this beach because sea turtle nesting beaches, especially hawksbill nesting beaches, are prime tourism beaches as well. So we share our west coast and our south coast with these animals who are coming out of the water to lay every single year. So I would say going further than lip service, which is, if I can be quite blunt, we often are preaching to the choir, but all choirs really do is come to an event and sing, and then they pack up their bags and go home. To be honest, we don't need a choir. What we need are persons of action. So we need people to not just understand and to have the basic knowledge and to kind of acknowledge that what we are saying is good, but we need to put that knowledge into practice. So not just sing the songs, but to go out there and essentially live those songs. So a couple things that you can do is have sea turtle friendly lights. Now, this is not, sea turtle friendly lights are not robbery lights, they're not rapist lights, they're not murder lights, they're not creepy dark beaches where persons are gonna lurk behind bushes to jump out at you. They are the same way, like you can see the key word there is cohabitation. So there's a way for to live and to be secure, knowing that your property is also secure from harm, and for turtles to have a safe and welcoming space to come out of the sea to lay their eggs as well. So you can have turtle friendly lights. These are long wavelength lights, so they're kind of amber colored to red. You can shield your lighting, you can change the angle, use the correct wattage and not overlight an area, put on motion sensors instead of leaving some lights on, avoiding uplighting trees, use particular like fixtures that direct the light where you want it and not just out to sea. Avoid things like massive spotlights that only illuminate the water so you can lay down in your bedroom and see fish swimming past and popping up to breathe, which people actually tell me they like to do. Things like that are beneficial. Don't drive on the beach. When you're going to the beach to park and have lunch, or if you're going to a picnic, do not drive onto the sand. You're compacting that sand, you're making it inhospitable for nesting, you're making it extra difficult for turtles. If there are eggs in the ground or hatchlings waiting to come up, you run the risk of simply driving over them and killing them. So that is something that we shouldn't do. Bonfires on the beach. And I'm talking to you, not just individuals, hotels, restaurants. I won't name any names, but there are a few of you that have bonfires directly on the sand. You are running the risk of cooking sea turtle eggs. You're running the risk of attracting hatchlings to that fire. There is someone recently who cooked an entire nest of turtles with a
Oh
fire.
my.
Single hatchlings came out alive. All of the others were killed in the sand because of the heat from that fire. So this is not arbitrary kind of Halloween boogie stories we're talking about. These are things that we are experiencing daily. Something else that you can do as well is to think about the products and the litter and the garbage and what you're producing, where it's going, how it's ending up, reducing your consumption of single use plastics and so on. So as opposed to using them and then disposing of them appropriately, you could just not use them at all. That is, use
Even better.
a reusable cup, use a metal fork, a metal spoon, etc. Those are things that you can do as well. But I think just being conscious. I know, as Bajans would say, we're the big McGuffey on the island. We are the top tier. We own the land. We can dig up the land, put down boulders, develop the land. We can essentially do what we want, and there is no other animal or no other creature on this island that can say anything about it. But what we need to do is to remember again that valuable word that we are trying to cohabit. We are sharing this space with animals that don't have the power that we do. We have the power to make a massive difference in their lives, be it a positive change or a negative change. So impact, all the word impact means regardless of what we do, we will have an impact. But impact can be either, it's like a scale or a balance. You can either have an overwhelmingly positive impact or you can have an overwhelmingly negative impact. And I would dare to say some of the small changes that would make a huge difference to turtles, we would not even notice when we've made them.
Yeah, absolutely. You're very correct. Those are some really great guidelines. I have a friend also who has a seaside property and recently changed their fencing to so that it was safe for the turtles, in order that they couldn't dig under the fencing or come in and get stuck inside their fence line. And they changed their lighting appropriately to suit that as well. So I believe that seaside construction should pay attention to the way that things are constructed and make sure that waterways are clear and stuff like that as well. If you can talk a bit about that.
Have they fenced in some of the beach? You mentioned digging underneath the fence. Is there
No,
fence?
so their property abuts onto the sand area, but their property is primarily soil. So what they had done is go down into the soil on their property to make sure that the turtles weren't attracted up all the way up to the house, so that it was safe, that they could not get stuck under the fence. They had one turtle who got stuck underneath the fence. So I think that is an issue. And it would seem as though that's an issue to a number of the properties now that we've had a look along that west coast line there.
There's a particular property that had a similar issue, and they did something very similar. They they dug down, and they put in a wall, and then they put their fence on the wall so that turtles couldn't get under. They have no beach.
Yeah.
What has happened is that when we had rough seas, the waves came up, they now had this solid wall footer that fit into their fence. And as those high energy waves hit into the fence, it eroded the beach.
Check it all out.
I would say one of the most depressing things in the last 15 years has been watching the changes on our coastline. So
Yeah.
watching places where I would have gone, in early 2000s or like 2010, and I remember on that beach one night we got stuck there for hours because six turtles came up to nest at the same time, and it was amazing. We used to say when you went to this beach, just go as late as possible because otherwise you are not getting off. Every time you finish and you turn around to walk back to the car, there's another one coming up in front of you, or you look back and there's one coming up behind you. And we used to call this kind of the national beach for nesting on the west coast because our index nesting beach is on the south. But there have been so many changes from coastal armoring to coastal protection and so on that now the entire section of that beach has eroded. And in front of one of the properties where we had the highest density of nesting, we get zero nests. And I mean, literally zero nests. They have a wet beach. So at low
Mhm.
tide, the sand is there and you can walk past, but at high tide, there's no longer any beach. So I will say that while we are, we have numerous motives. We want to protect property. You've made a massive investment. Obviously, you want your house and your wall and everything to be safe from these extreme weather events that we're seeing more and more of. You want to protect your beach as well. But there are ways to do things, and there's some things that I will say in the long run cause more harm than good. And I think we have so many case studies on the island where you can literally go and see what the putting in of boulders has done to this property, or the putting in of a wall has done to this property,
Mhm.
down by this other property, and see, they put in a hedge instead and they have an open lot. There's so many properties where there were open lots before they were developed. They actually had nice 20 meters of beach or so, and then somebody buys the lot and they build a beautiful house and they put in their seawall, and 3 to 4 years later, the section of the open lot that they built on has no sand, and the little piece that the lot next to them still has sand. There's so many stretches
Mhm.
along the coast where there's no beach in front of houses, and then you find
Yeah.
a tiny little pocket that's maybe a drain or maybe an undeveloped lot that still has a lot of sand, primarily because there are no hard structures, and
Mhm.
make a difference. What I will say is that we're talking about, if I can be so blunt, we're talking about what people can do and talking about garbage and all of these things some persons may consider to be small potatoes. The big issue that we're having is even when we protect turtles, we protect their nests, we relocate eggs during storm events, we rescue nesting females from rocks and boulders and from being trapped. We ensure that every single hatchling that we can save gets safely to the sea because we want every hatchling to survive. I always tell people every single little baby turtle is a ball of hope. This is hope for Hawkbills and for the next generation. This is their hope for the future. So every
Mhm.
single hatchling that we can release safely and give the best possible chance, we do that. But at the end of the day, when there's no coastline left for turtles to come back and nest
It's
on,
time to get that too.
what difference are we really making? So that's why when I told you that turtles need help, and that's why I'm helping. There's such a wide variety of issues, some of them direct, some of them indirect, that are facing sea turtles and facing, tourism and facing our coastline in general. And there are a lot of
Mhm.
issues that property owners are also concerned about. But I think we need to start approaching some of these solutions to these problems in a more holistic fashion, from the viewpoint that yes, I need to protect my house, but I need to protect the beach. One, because
Mhm.
having a beach in front of your house is, it increases your property value.
Mhm.
Nobody wants, you're going to get more money if you sell a property with a beach than without. But
Mhm.
also because I know that, turtles nest on my beach and I want to preserve that space for kids, for the future of Barbados, but also for these animals that desperately need it. And try to find a solution that allows your beach to stay and to be maintained, even if it means giving up a few meters, maybe, and bringing your wall back a bit, or using a softer boundary, or using some type of innovative technology when it comes to constructing your revetment or your or whatever. Um, I think there's a lot that we have to do in terms of our response to some of the crises that we're facing: sea level rise, global warming, erosion, all of those things. We do need to tailor our response, not just from our human perspective, which is preserve and protect property and investment and that kind of thing, but also from the perspective that we have to try to preserve the environment. because there's so many animals that are critical to our ecosystem and to our well-being that need that space as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of the things that you're talking about right now lead really nicely into our next question, which has to do with everything that happens inland. So we're talking a lot about coastal preservation, making sure that the beaches are preserved, our actions on the beach and our actions along the coastline. But a lot of the time, our actions inland are affecting the beach. This is something that we're acutely aware of at Walker's Reserve, where the coastline preservation is a huge part of the overall plan. So deterring things like you could have said, driving on the beach, bonfires directly on the beach in the laying areas, and the preservation of the dune system, which therefore protects the inland system. Now, that property is directly on the beach as well. So I'm not necessarily referring directly to that, but say the people who live inland in St. George and St. Thomas, there are a lot of things that we do on land, which have a direct relation to what's going on in the ocean through our guttering system, which is our gullies and our heavy rainfall events that take everything out to sea. So I'm wondering if for our next question, can you enlighten us a little bit about the harm that we might be causing with our inland actions when we're nowhere near the beach that affect the turtles?
Okay, so I'm gonna go a bit broad and then kind of narrow it down a bit. So at the end of the day, the direction that our government takes, the direction that our ministries take, the direction that we as a nation and a country takes really comes down to the wants and desires often of individuals. Because so people can apply political pressure. You know, there is such a thing as the will of the people and what the people want and so on. So I think, it's not left up to coastal property owners. We are, whether you live, I don't have the pleasure of living on a beach. I live inland as well. But regardless of where you live on the island, your thoughts, your desires, your will for the protection of our coastline, for access to the coastline for certain persons, for the opportunity to utilize the coastline, whether it's for recreation, whether it's for fishing, whether it's for livelihood, etc. All of that is important as well. So one of the most important things that you can do as an inland individual is to lobby for change. Speak to your local representative, speak to your minister, speak to whoever you know in government, and push. 20 voices, even if they're saying the same thing, are always much better than one voice. So you may often see somebody say something and you're like, oh, what she's saying making sense, she's talking truth, and you nod and you agree or you click like on a post or something, but you don't add your voice to the chorus. And what we need is your voice being
More voices.
so one of the big things that you can do, regardless of where you live, is to agitate for change and use your voice and to speak up when things are happening. If you see something that you're like, oh, that shouldn't happen, but you say absolutely nothing, I will put to you that you have been complicit. If you see something that is happening that is harmful, that is taking our island in a direction that you do not think we should go, but you keep your mouth shut and you don't say a word, you are complicit in that happening. All right, so in terms of harm that we're causing living inland, one of the important things I would say is our use of pesticides, our use of toxins. So when I say pesticides, I don't necessarily mean the farmer next to you who is using some spray can or a tractor and spraying poison or whatever to kill caterpillars and insects all over the field. It might be as simple as you disposing of things in your backyard by pouring it up in the corner of the yard, pouring oil in the hole in the back, or emptying out some kind of waste bathroom cleaner that you have and you just go pour it in the back because you're not sure how to dispose of it. All of those things are going to go somewhere. So when you pour it into that magical corner of dirt, they do not evaporate, they do not disappear. They are simply leaving and they're traveling somewhere. So whether it's an impact, because we talk about reef to ridge all the time, or ridge to reef, whether it's an impact on the sea, because eventually they make their way through our water courses, down our systems, through our underground rivers and so on into the sea, whether it's an impact on our health from our water quality and so on, all of those are potential impacts. Illegal dumping and just being plain nasty. Those are also problems as well. Everything you put into a gully, everything that you put into an open lot or some hidden corner where you have to drive through the bush to hide and throw things off a truck, all of those have a negative impact. not just in terms of that plastic and that garbage and so on getting down to the sea, which often happens, but they also just have an impact on the general quality of our environment. So if we believe that our everything is connected and the health of our birds and our mammals and everything creates a healthy ecosystem, when you harm things inland, you are also not, you're kind of, I would say, upsetting the balance. So you may not be directly impacting turtles, but you are impacting one side of the ecosystem, which can have a cascade impact on another side. Another way that if you're inland, you may be having an impact is, believe it or not, don't curse me, paving around your house. This is a pet peeve for me. So we all need water to drink. We all know that water is a bit scarce. We want this water not to flow over the surface and flow straight out into the sea. Now, this water transports some of those same pesticides and all of those things. It transports sediment and other things that cloud the water or settle on our coral reefs and can have a negative impact. But not just that, it is transporting away, our health. This is the water that we want to drink.
We want to drink it.
To flow over the surface and to go into gutters, we want it to infiltrate our soil.
Mm-hmm.
What you need to do is that you need something that is permeable. Cement is not permeable. So if you can leave grass or soil or gravel or whatever you use, some kind of permeable surface around your house, you're going to make a huge difference, because when that rain falls and it has a chance to infiltrate that land instead of going into the road and flowing down the street and out the careenage or wherever, you are adding water to our aquifer. And if every single one of us could leave as much land open for infiltration as possible, we reduce those negative and harmful substances getting into the sea and impacting coral reefs and impacting whatever, but we also increase the amount of water that is going down into the ground to recharge our aquifers. Even collecting that water, and which is even better, because when you collect it, you are watering your plants and so on. Some of it still gets into the ground, but you are reducing your dependence on the water that is there in the aquifer already. So you're utilizing water, ensuring that it stays in the cycle and doesn't go out to sea, but you're also not turning on the tap every time you need water, and you're reducing our use of water, which is also important. So I know that some of these things you're probably thinking this is a bit of a stretch, but trust me, every single thing is connected.
Absolutely. Every single thing is connected. And I'm not thinking it's a bit of a stretch, because I'm thinking that those are the same things that we at CPRI harp on about all the time. Now, we're harping on about them for a slightly different reason. Mostly to do with the water table, our water quality, the use of water, and for farming purposes. So we're looking at the inland things. So just even the connectedness that we're not normally saying, these are the reasons, and it affects the reefs and the turtles. The ridge to reef is a big aspect of everything that we do as well. And that interconnectedness is really what we need to see. The reason why we need to coordinate with all of the different organizations, and everybody needs to have that full scale of education in terms of where does everything come back around to, and everything affects everything else. Guys, if you're just joining us today at the moment, we are chatting with Carla Daniel. She's from the Barbados Sea Turtle Project, and today we are recognizing World Animal Day. If you have questions for Carla, we are going to get to some live questions from the audience in just a little while. Be sure to type your questions in on the comments below our Facebook or our YouTube channel. So on that interconnectedness that we were talking about, I've seen personally a number of people talking about bees recently. So the bees and the issues that they're having with regards to the wildfires that have been throughout Australia and California in this year. Everybody has the concept that a bee is fairly integral. It's fairly widely known now. The bee is integral to a lot of the things that we do. It's the very reason we have crops and we have food. So what I'm wondering is, as a global ecosystem, how integral is the role of the turtle? What has happened globally, and what may happen in the future if turtles simply cease to exist or something like that?
Okay. So, well, turtles in general, when people say turtles, they're normally thinking, because we have three kind of groups. You have the freshwater terrapins, you have the land tortoises, and you have the sea turtles.
Sea turtles, yeah.
I am more sea turtle oriented. And then you have 7 species of sea turtles. They overlap a bit, but they're in, different oceans in different parts of the world, and
Mhm.
diets are very different as well. And a big part of the role that sea turtles play is diet. So we primarily work with hawksbills, so we can talk a little bit about hawksbills. And hawksbills feed on sponge. A sponge is an animal, although it's not. It's a very
This one around.
incongruous animal. It doesn't look like an animal because it's almost growing and rooting like a plant, but a sponge is an animal on our reefs. Now, because of how hard and how pointed and so on the external layers of the exoskeleton, you could say, of the sponge is, there are not a lot of animals that can eat sponge. Hawksbill turtles they have some special features that allow them to eat sponge. They're large animals, about a meter in length for the shell, 165 pounds for the animal itself, and they're eating that sponge. You're probably saying, but who cares about sponge? Why do they need to eat it? Well, sponge grows faster than coral, but they both like the same type of habitat. So without keeping the sponge in check, it will outgrow the coral and reduce the available space on the reef for corals to settle and to start to grow. So hawksbills keep sponge in check. They also, when they take bites out of the sponge, they expose the kind of soft, more tender tissue that other fish that would love to eat sponge can then go and nibble on and feed on as well. So they're making it more accessible for other animals, as well as helping to keep it in check, not eradicate it, but keep it in check so that corals have a chance to colonize the reef area as well, and they have a chance, even though they're slow growing, to survive. Now, there's one story that I always tell people. I am not saying that this story is, 150% accurate, but it is pretty true what I'm saying. So, can you tell me, Jen, the connection between a certain species of turtles and the quality of fish cakes that you get in Barbados?
The quality of fish cakes.
Yes.
Wow, I cannot, but I am very interested to hear.
Okay, so fish cakes, for those of you who don't know, they're made from salted cod traditionally. That cod used to be imported from quite far away, but don't worry about that part. And it's a mix of flour and chives and onion, etc. You make a batter and then you drop them in hot oil and fry them. So Barbadians love them. We have songs called talking about fish cakes and bakes, and it is an integral part of, I would say, our food culture, as well as just our regular culture. Every Bajan that is a Bajan will eat fish cakes. May not be able to cook them, but will definitely be able to. All right. So in recent years, you would have heard a lot of complaints from Barbadians on the quality of the fish cake. People are complaining and
More
saying
flour than fish.
fish, more flour than fish, that the vendors are using fish essence and they're not, that there's some issue. It doesn't taste like the fish cakes their grandmother used to make, and all of these things. Now, one of the reason for that is directly linked to a turtle. Now, let's dial it back a little bit. Where does the fish that are going to your fish cakes come from? Now, this is typically codfish, and cod, the one big cod fishery used to be up north in Canada. And they had a massive, massive cod fishery, thousands upon thousands and thousands of employees, etc. I can only imagine how many millions of tons they probably harvested and exported and sold a year. So at one point, it was recognized that the cod fishery was in decline. And it was so severe that a very difficult decision was made to temporarily close the fishery, because it got to the point where they thought, if we don't do something drastic, we are going to lose the fishery altogether. So to avoid that happening, they temporarily closed the fishery. It kind of made sense, because you would think, okay, so if we close the fishery, the fish are going to reproduce, they're going to have lots of baby fish, and in a few years, the population will increase, and it will get back to a stage where it's once again sustainable to harvest this species of fish.
Mm-hmm.
The fishery was closed. What was recognized, however, is that the numbers of fish were not rebounding as expected. So you had this closed fishery, you were expecting to see the population increasing. It wasn't increasing as fast as people thought it was. So then people started to investigate and wonder why, like what's going on? Where are the fish coming back? And it was realized that there were a number of threats and other underlying factors that were causing the population to kind of stay contracted. One of these was predation of the fish or fish larvae by jellyfish. Now, jellyfish are predators. They're not out there grazing on grass like cows or anything. They're out there, catching things and eating them. So one of them was this increased predation by jellyfish. And you're probably thinking, all right, jellyfish, but what does this have to do with turtles? Now, one of the largest consumers of jellyfish is the leatherback sea turtle, which is the largest species of turtles. I encourage you, go on YouTube, look for a video of leatherbacks feeding. They just swallow jellyfish whole, jellyfish after jellyfish. This is their primary source of food. This is what they do, and they do it very, very well. They're very adapted. They can dive to remarkable depths, one of the deepest diving reptiles. They can hold their breath for an amazingly long time, and they can weigh over a ton, up to 2 tons, over 6 feet in length. They're like the size of a desk or a small car. They are massive turtles, and they are eating tons and tons of these jellyfish. What happened was that the Pacific leatherback population, because of a number of threats, being caught on lines, drowning in fishing nets, etc., crashed. So this population of turtles, which was feeding on these jellyfish and helping to keep the jellyfish population in check, was suddenly not existing in the numbers that it was before. So the population plummeted. Jellyfish increased. We had warmer waters and other things going on. So I've simplified it a little bit, but this is my poetic license. So essentially what's happened is that cod is now scarce. And not only is it scarce, it's extremely expensive. So if you ever go to any supermarket or store to buy codfish, you would notice that maybe in the last few decades, the price of cod has, in some instances, quadrupled. It has now taken cod out of the price range of the average Barbadian. And not just that, it's just not as available. You just don't see it the way you used to see it before. You may see it, one every couple months or something, but now you see this mysterious thing called salted fish. And you're like, what kind of fish is this? Nobody knows. It's like salted mystery fish. Sometimes you see salted pollock as well. And these are the fish we're now using in our fish cake recipes and in our fish cake attempts. The problem is it doesn't have the same taste, and it doesn't have I would say, it doesn't have the same body. It's quite, pollock is quite soft as well. So it doesn't do what what cod did for fish cake. So because of this, our fish cakes are no longer the same. So something that is quintessentially Bajan, something that was a cheap source of protein and cheap source of food that we all grew up eating, has been, I would dare to say, changed forever because of something that happened an ocean away. Far away, something that happened with what would seem to be two completely unconnected species, the codfish and the leatherback. But changes to them both had this amazing impact on this tiny little island way down in the Caribbean. It has changed, our culture and our source of food forever. So I like this story because it just really shows you how interconnected things are. And the thing is that you don't need to know that things are connected for them to be connected. You don't need to physically, as a person, you do not have to recognize that link for the link to exist. Unfortunately, often we only recognize that a number of these linkages exist when it happens. And we have this overwhelmingly negative impact or this negative situation. You're like, oh my God, what's going on? And then you're like, oh no, this is extinct, and no, it's caused this. And you're like, well, if it's extinct or if it's declined to the point where it's close to extinction, there's not a whole lot that you can do. I mean, even if we can save the population, sometimes the population has to be at a certain level to fulfill its ecological role. 5 leatherbacks cannot do what an entire population of leatherbacks can do. So that's
the interconnectedness of everything is quite interesting, and that story is very, very interesting as well. I wonder if there is a locally available sustainable fish which could fill that gap for our fish cakes anyways. That challenge out there to all the chefs.
You have to prepare the fish cake at some point. You never know.
Yeah. So guys, if you're just joining us, we are joined today by Carla Daniel of the Barbados Sea Turtle Project in recognition of World Animal Day, and we're very happy to have Carla here with you. Now, Carla, we only have a few more minutes left, so I think we're actually going to go straight into questions from our audience, as I do see that we have a few of them, and I want to make sure that our audience, gets some of their questions answered. So I wonder if we could have our first question from the audience. There we go. So this one is from a YouTube user. Thank you so much to everybody who's watching on YouTube. Most of us are familiar with the Hawkbill turtle. Do we get leatherback turtles in Barbados, and what information can you share on these types of turtles?
Okay, so leatherbacks, that's the one we were mentioning just now. We do have leatherbacks nesting on Barbados. They primarily nest on the east coast of the island. So they're nesting anywhere from, I would say, Morgan Lewis, straight down Walkers, down East Coast Road as well. Rarely we will get them. Like last year, we had a leatherback nest on Haywoods, which is on the west. We have had a leatherback nest down Drill Hall side and over like Dover Beach as well. But those are quite rare. The majority of our population does nest on the east coast of the island. Now,
Is there a reason for that?
The waves. As I mentioned, leatherbacks are huge, and it's not easy for a turtle who is buoyant and spending its days slowly swimming, well, maybe not so slow, but swimming to drag itself, carrying, can you imagine 2 tons dragging yourself out of the water? So those kind of high energy waves help to push the turtles out of the sea, and they make it a bit easier for those animals to get onto the beach to actually commence their nesting. Now, we have a relatively small population of nesting leatherbacks compared to our hawksbills. They run second, but they're actually not that many. When you're speaking about leatherbacks in the Caribbean, you are primarily speaking about Trinidad, which has massive leatherback nesting beaches. I think it's on their northern coastline. I might be wrong, but Grand Riviere and Matura, those 2 beaches get hundreds of leatherbacks each night in the middle of the season. So we don't really compare to them, but we do have a small, lovely population of leatherbacks that nest on the eastern side of our island.
That's great. And most of those, as you were mentioning, at Walker's Reserve, and I spoke a bit earlier about the conservation efforts that are being done there to preserve the dune system and preserve that beach, which is a hugely popular. We work with a hugely popular nesting site for the turtles, and we're working with the Barbados Sea Turtle Project as well in making sure that the conservation efforts are kept in place. And you'll see signs if you used to be one of those people who would go off-roading and on bikes and in vehicles, you will see signage asking people to please respect the dune system and adhere to some of the things that we've been talking about today as well. So if people can play their part, then the turtles can do their thing too, and maybe we can get some good fish cakes down the road. We have lots of more questions from our audience, so if we can go into our next one. Our next one is actually from Micah Joseph. It is always a good idea to start young. What more can be done by the school systems across the Caribbean?
Okay, so that's an interesting question, especially because the Caribbean is made up of a group of sovereign islands. So these are islands that have their own laws, their own systems, etc. I would have mentioned in Barbados that it is illegal to harvest turtles and so on. However, that is not the case in all of our islands. There are islands where there's a 7-month long, so more than half of the year, it is legal for their fishermen to harvest turtles and to kill them for food. So even though these are critically endangered or endangered animals that are facing lots of threats, it is not quite the same. So I would say that one of the things that should be done is that we need a CARICOM level sea turtle conservation policy for our region. This doesn't impact a country's right to make its own laws and to enforce and so on and do what it wants. But I think if sea turtle conservation is going to be effective in the region, we need to have that shared policy, because at the end of the day, it's a migratory species. I can cuddle and love and hug and spend, every living moment I have saving turtles in Barbados. But when they complete their nesting and they leave our island and they swim through the territories and waters of other countries on their way to their foraging ground, and they are hauled out and their heads chopped off, there is absolutely nothing that I can do about it. And a lot of nesting females are lost to the harvest and to other practices in other islands. So I would say that we need to start with some type of CARICOM policy. It's been my thought for years now that a lot of the education that we need to do doesn't need to be, let us have a topic or a subject that says sea turtle conservation or environmental education. But you can do things in mathematics. You can do, when you learn English, you can have passages and poems and essays that speak to environmental conservation, that speak to monkeys and birds and bats and geckos and all the other things that need exposure, we can really integrate these important things in social studies, in history, in all of these subject areas. So it's not just a case of learning, how fast a train goes versus a car, and about mountains and other things in other countries, lions and tigers and bears that we don't have, but we can integrate things that are important to us, important to our region, and important to our country into all of these lessons, into our curriculum, in ways that you're still teaching math and multiplication and all of those things, but there's an underlying value that is added because you're teaching about what is important to us, and you're subtly, I don't want to say subconsciously, but you have that common thread of environmental conservation and just environmental awareness running throughout teaching of these children.
Yeah, it's like subliminal advertising. If it's always there and always a part of what you're learning and reading and doing.
Integrating these things into our lessons and the books that kids are reading, and the subjects and the test papers and all of those things would go a long way to starting to get them thinking a bit more and maybe opening their eyes. If you have blackbirds and lizards and monkeys and other things in the classroom, when they go outside and they see one, they not only connect it to something that they've read about, monkeys and how they came to Barbados, but if it was a part of a math lesson, they remember, oh, when I'm multiplying, I carry the one because one monkey goes here and the other monkey goes there. So, it brings all of that, back to the mind as well.
Absolutely. That's an excellent idea. Challenge to the educators out there. So our next question that we have from YouTube as well is from Shay Warren. Do you have a relationship with other turtle conservation projects regionally, example Trinidad or St. Lucia?
Yes, so we do have a relationship. One of the things that I will say is amazing about sea turtle conservation in the region is that we have this awesome network called the Wider Caribbean Sea Turtle Conservation Network, otherwise known as WIDECAST. And we talk to each other all the time. We share information, we share expertise. We even have like a WhatsApp chat that everybody talks in. So we are quite close to I think it's the St. Lucia National Trust that is doing conservation there. And then you have Nature Seekers in Trinidad, as well as a number of other groups in Tobago and so on. So Jamaica, Grenada, St. Kitts as well, Antigua also. Then we have Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Brazil, Puerto Rico. It's really, we do have a network in the region that facilitates the exchange of information, of experiences and expertise and all of that. So you can actually check out the WIDECAST website. That's WIDECAST, and there's tons of information. All of these action recovery plans for all of the islands in the WIDECAST network is available. They have lots of technical documents and all kinds of fantastic supportive material that will tell you about the work that we're doing individually as countries, as well as throughout the region as a whole.
Excellent. It's great to hear that everybody can work together. As long as we can get some more of those countries on board, that would be great. We do have a few more questions, and I want to get as many people in as possible. Our next one is from Stefan Barker. Blue Sky is thinking, as an NGO, what resources would you require to be able to take your work to that next level? And what would that look like?
Oh, okay. So that
wish list.
Going to be quick, but that's one of the, quick as a nutshell. For NGOs, the biggest need is always, I would say, funding. We are not a government organization. We are not a business. So the majority of the work that the Sea Turtle Project does is done on a shoestring budget, and we do it through grants and donations. So the next level for us really is to obtain sustainable funding. That is one of our big goals. A big part of what we want to do going forward is to obtain a headquarters. So we kind of operate out of an office space at UE, but what we want essentially is a permanent headquarters where we have life-size exhibition space, where we're able to have think tanks, where we're able to do more work with school kids, where we are able to do, there's an endless list of ideas really that we would like to push forward. But the biggest push is sustainable financing, because when you are living, I don't want to say hand to mouth as Bajans would say, are constantly searching for funding, and every year you're not sure where the funding is going to come from. Will it be enough? Will you be able to man the 24-hour hotline? Will you have enough volunteers? Will you have enough resources? Then, it takes up so much time trying to source funding that it really limits what you are available to, what you're able to do, what projects you're able to run and to operate, because you are simply trying to get the bare essentials covered and get enough money to do them. Before you know it, it's December, the year has ended, and it's time to look for funding all over again. So one of the things we want to do is to take that burden off, to try to ensure that we have sustainable funding. The Sea Turtle Project, and I am biased, of course, but the Sea Turtle Project is too important to our country and to, I would say, the Caribbean as well, because Barbados has one of the largest, second largest population of nesting hawksbills in the insular Caribbean. And I say my turtles all the time, but these are not my turtles. These are all of our turtles. And I think the project is too important to be, kind of on an unstable footing. So once we have that stable foundation, once we have that sustainable financing, then I think we will definitely be able to go on. There is an endless list of projects that I have that we would love to get involved in, but we just need to get that foundation set first, and then really the sky is the limit.
Absolutely. And we've put your contact information for the website for the Sea Turtle Project in the comments, and we encourage everybody to engage with you going forward. We'll just squeeze in one more question, which is a good one from Dominique Bryan. Do you think that there's a way to reverse the beach loss in an environmentally friendly way?
Dominique, you're coming with the hard questions. Okay, so I guess we can start by saying, what is the cause of beach loss? Some people are going to say it is sea level rise. Some people will say that it's due to development and unsustainable development that we've had on our coastline. I do think it is a mix. We are in a situation, however, where what has been developed is developed. We can't all of a sudden take all the buildings on the West Coast and put them on the land side of the road. And sure, if you walk on any beach in Barbados, so for example, Fitz Village, there in the area of the Shepherd Church, where there's that massive big yellow boat, there is a nice wide beach. It is the most stable section of sand on that beach. Walk to the south or to the north, every single beach that's in front of a property is less than half of the width of that open area. If you go to Reeds, if you go to any number of places, all of the sections of coastline that are undeveloped are the areas where we've been able to maintain our beaches. You can look at coastal armoring. People talk about environmentally friendly. There are lots. There's Heron Bay. There is the boardwalk. There is a number of private hotels and so on that have put the breakwaters and the groins in and the revetments. And in a lot of cases, they've not been as successful as we would have hoped. We've either had situations where other people complain that their beaches are now starved of sand. We've had situations where persons are saying that even though I've put in all these hard structures, my beach is still disappearing. What do I do? So I would say it comes down to, one, preserving these undeveloped areas that we have, and very, very, very carefully looking at how persons are allowed to develop those areas. So making people, wherever possible, set their hard structures back. Give waves the space that they need to gently break on the beach and make their way up, using soft boundaries like hedges and so on that do not add to the force of the waves to help to reduce erosion. Having people, when you put your property back, why would you build a house 2 meters from the water, and then when there's a storm and your wall gets damaged, act as though you are? It is not common. I would say it's not good practice. If you know that we're living in a time where you get hurricanes, you get rough seas, you get all of these things, but do not stick your thing on the high water mark. Put it back. Let there be a little bit of a buffer zone. Allow some space. Because all that's going to happen is your property is going to get damaged, and you're going to apply for some emergency permit to fix it. And then before you know it, the beach is gone. So if I am completely frank, the first step to reversing beach loss is, this is why I'm not running your government, but if it was up to me, I would say the first step to reversing beach loss is whenever a property is sold, whenever there is a redevelopment or a renovation of a property, getting those hard structures moved back. First, give the beach space to grow, allow it to expand. Get rid of some of the walls if it's not absolutely necessary. Just, as Bacon to say, dress back, your house and your hotel and your property, and just allow there to be space. Where you have wide, healthy beaches, do not allow people, because we have, this law about the the high water mark and how many meters above the high water mark you're allowed to set back. On some beaches like Carla Bay and Brandon's, that law allows you to actually fence in a great deal of the sand and of the beach itself. It takes you very close to the waterline. I would change that law. I honestly think it's ridiculous. And if we're going to preserve our beaches, we have to look at legislation. If we're going to reverse some of the damage, we have to look at legislation. We cannot wait until our west coast is completely underwater to then start talking about moving properties back and building in environmental friendly ways. We have to try to preempt the situation, and we have to look at other ways to do things other than simply going first to hard structures. You know what really holds sand together and what stops, like the same way that breakwaters and groins and so on do? Mangrove swamps.
Mangrove swamps.
Breaks the waves from a hurricane and protects houses and villages and so on. Mangrove. You know what filters water and keeps that water clear so that corals can survive? Mangrove. Well, we are constantly looking to man-made solutions and hard structures and armoring to solve all our problems. But in a lot of cases, these problems didn't exist before a lot of these ecosystem features were removed from our coastline. So it is perhaps time to look back at planting some mangroves. At increasing the amount of vegetation. We're talking about planting trees all the time. Increasing the amount of vegetation on our beaches. Having serious penalties in place when people remove that vegetation without, a by your leave, for example. Really enforcing our laws, and I guess trying to convince people, because there will be some people have looked at me and said, I don't really care enough about turtles, and that is fine. You don't have to like turtles, you don't have to like anything really, but you have, I think, to understand that there are consequences, and because of these consequences, there are certain structures that we have to put in place, and there are certain things that you have to do whether you like it or lump it, because at the end of the day, you have paid $20 million for this property and it is yours. This is our island, and the health and the stability of the island is really, the future of us all. It's not just
absolutely, and it's really about that interconnectedness that we've been talking about thus far. So you don't have to like turtles, but do you like to go to the beach? Do you like fresh drinking water? Do you like a good fish cake? So it all comes back down.
All of those things are really important as well.
Absolutely. Carla, it has been so spectacular to have you on the show today. I think we could keep going for 2 hours probably, but unfortunately we have to draw it to a close at some point. Really, really a great time having you here, and I hope everybody has engaged. And please feel free to reach out to the Barbados Sea Turtle Project. They are always in need of various different things. Funding is a major one of them, volunteers, and of course keep that turtle hotline available to yourself. Turn off your lights, change your lighting, all of those things that Carla was talking about. And thank you, Carla. It's been really, really great to have you on. To our audience, if you missed any part of today's session, you can always rewatch it later on Wired's YouTube channel. The session is always available there. Remember that we have had about 25 sessions thus far, and you can rewatch any of them. Don't forget to click subscribe so you can keep up with everything that we're doing. And please join us again on October 13th when we celebrate International Day for Disaster Reduction. See you then.